Welcome to the OC. I'm Phil, and this is my co-host Corey. And tonight we are interviewing Dr. Chris Allen, who I'm excited to talk to because I am a Bigfoot enthusiast. I enjoy this whole topic. And yeah, thanks for joining us, Chris. I appreciate it.
Guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. We've been talking back and forth over. I follow you on Instagram. You follow us. I see that you're very deep into the. Oh, you disappeared on us. You're very deep in. Yeah, there you go. Don't fall down. You've got this. So you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and and then we can kind of pick your brain a little.
Well, no problem. I have always kind of been a citizen scientist since I was a little kid. My mom had to, drag me out to the zoo. I was part of the junior herpetology club and have always kind of been into the biological, the living sciences.
For sure.
That being said, also we lived out in the country when I was a kid up until being a teenager, pretty far out. We lived on a about 1,000-acre beef ranch in Oklahoma. Outside of
country.
It's a lot of country, flat, pretty lush as far as trees and stuff. But there's also a lot of open terrain.
Right.
I didn't really, especially in Oklahoma, it's not really, especially back then, you don't really hear a lot of Bigfoot stuff coming from there.
Right.
No, it's more like I always hear Pacific Northwest or
Montana.
That. Yeah, like
lower Montana or upper Montana, like an Alberta range.
That way.
Exactly.
But it's not. There is little sightings all over the place. I mean, it's not sort of, I'm sure there's Oklahoma sightings.
Exactly. Now, when I was 16, we were coming because I know us weird Americans, but my mom and my stepdad were gun show vendors. So basically, we would load up our station wagon with rifles and ammo and go to the nearest gun show and try to sell our wares.
Yep. We have those here too, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
Not to the extent you guys have.
At all. No. And the ID requirements and the checks they're required. Yeah.
It's a lot of pain. Yeah, it's a pain. Yeah. But yeah.
This was late 90s Oklahoma. So just kind of to paint the stage as far as like the geopolitical situation in our state, everybody thought, this is so silly to say, Y2K was coming and they had to stock up on guns to fight the government or whatever. So anyway, we had a lot of serendipity, selling our guns and military surplus. And that would be an all-day evolution. Well, long story short, my mom and my two younger brothers, they were 9 years younger and 6 years younger, are sleeping in the back of the station wagon. I'm sitting up front with my stepdad who's driving, and we are driving back into our property. Basically, when you go to our old house, you had to drive about half a mile down this dirt ball road, this not very well lit dirt road that terminated with our homestead, which was kind of off to the right, and then a couple of barns, and then some corrals and like places for like sick animals. And this was all kind of at the very end of the road. It's late at night, I would say probably around midnight, and we were driving back in towards the homestead, and literally I saw something shoot across the road at an impossible speed. And I know, I was only 16 when I first saw that, but you got to think, this is a 16-year-old that had been out in the country my whole life.
For sure.
Hunting, just being out in nature, riding horses, breeding animals and everything, you become kind of an amateur naturalist. And
for sure.
the thing that I saw that was just ahead of our car, kind of right at the edge of the effective range of our, highly oxidized headlights, was tall. It was definitely bipedal, and it was a kind of a shade of gray, where it was a lighter gray kind of on the outside, and it looked like more internal to the creature. It was kind of like a darker color.
Like a gray, like a gorilla? Like that gray, you know how they get that silvery gray?
Not quite as pronounced as like a
okay.
silverback gorilla. It was kind of a, like, not quite a light gray. I don't really know how to explain it. Kind of a milkier gray.
And it could have been hard because of the, like you said, the lighting conditions were not great. So
Well, yeah.
really, I mean, you'd see a gray. It's like, well, okay, am I seeing the actual color? Or am I seeing just really bad lighting? So yeah, I can see what you're saying. That it would be hard to make out a darkish fur. What exact color it is? Is it a brown? Is it yeah.
And it's moving, and you're moving. So that obviously impedes your ability to see exactly,
Yeah, we're coming in, and I see this thing, and I saw this creature for probably 3 to 4 seconds. It's amazing just how your life can change in 3 to 4 seconds. I'll tell you that, because I had seen everything that was out there: horses, cattle, mountain lions. We frequently chased a mountain lion off of our property with shotguns.
Yeah, for sure.
This thing was definitely on 2 legs. It was definitely bipedal, and it ran right in front of our car.
Right.
Now,
did anyone else see it? Was it just you who saw it, or was it obviously whoever was driving? Or
I'm trying to. I know we have limited time. I'm trying to tell the story. It's like
no. I don't want you to feel. I don't want you to feel pressured. We will get your story.
Don't worry about that. We'll manage it.
Hey, if we have to just reboot in, no problem. So you take your time. No hurry.
Check it out. Let's say this is like our axis of advance, and running along in the same direction as our homestead, there's a what's called a 5-wire fence. Basically, what 5-wire is, it's a barbed wire fence that has 5 different strands.
Oh, okay.
And on 5-wire, the lowest strand is pretty low to the ground. It's maybe, I don't know, 12, maybe 18 inches up. It's a low clearing. And this 5-wire is bisecting the road that I'm on the left, and it's running right along. This freaking thing goes across, on bipedal. It had like a slight lean to it, to its gait. And I understand why people say that these things have like ethereal components to them, and they can like disappear or whatnot. They're not disappearing, but the way that it moved, I've never seen anything move like this in my life. It had to have just went like, without even missing a pace, it had to have just gone flat, just flush onto all fours, and went straight under that 5-wire. And on the
it's funny you
side,
say that, because I've seen a video. I don't know if you've seen this video where it's a sighting. They're filming this creature, and all of a sudden, it's big. You can tell, like, this thing is not small. All of a sudden, it ducks behind this kind of little hill, and it pops up in the middle of a field. Now, it would have had to crawl on all fours at a ridiculous speed, like an inhuman speed. And I'm sure you've seen the video. I don't know if you know the. I'll post it actually if I can, but it's pretty amazing. So
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I haven't seen. Maybe I have seen it, and it's not ringing any bells. But I don't know. I don't know if you guys have heard of a researcher named Randy Harrington. But
I have heard of Harrington. Yep.
Okay. In the world of Bigfoot, there's obviously like a hierarchy with, and I'm at the bottom of the barrel. I'm an absolute freaking noob. But Randy Harrington is one of the most knowledgeable and experienced guys out there. The guy is he's a wizard, in a sense that his methodology is like different from everybody else. Like
Right.
he's a thinking man. Randy Harrington has told me several times about his own personal accounts of these creatures dropping down the same way. You know, when it first happened, here's what I know about my encounter, because it was so dark and the lighting was so crappy. I know it didn't jump. I know it didn't jump over the 5-wire, because the way the headlights were, the way our high beams were, I would have seen it go over. So it had to have gone straight down and went either. And, you know, I've thought about this a lot. It either must have just gone straight across that field. It was like a grazing field for cattle. Or another thing it might have done is it could have paralleled the road left or right and ran either behind us or out further at a greater distance
to evade.
But I think it went under the 5-wire.
So how much space is between the strands? Are we talking like a
12
foot?
to 18 inches in the bottom.
12 to 18, so about like a foot and a half. So, and this thing would have been what would you guess, Chris, from your brief like what, 8 feet, fairly broad, like what, mostly fur, like any ideas description wise as to what you would have said? Like, could this thing have, I mean, most things, if they can fit their head in something, they can fit the rest of them through, generally.
Not for me.
Okay, maybe not for you, but if I can fit my head through something, usually I can contort the rest of myself through. And I'm wondering with this this thing you saw, like, did it leave any fur, anything on the 5-wire, or was it like, did it literally, like, if it was broad at all, 12 to 18 inches ain't a lot.
It's not. And you know, here's the thing. I have no effing idea if it left hair on the bottom strand of that 5-wire. At the time, that was like the last thing I was even thinking about. Yeah. I know. The one thing I know, it didn't break stride and it didn't break pace. And you know, not to like seem like ostentatious, but you know, I was somewhat of a pretty renowned athlete in my younger day. I was, you know, an all-American wrestler, and I could run a 40-yard dash in 4.7. And this thing made me look like a toddler. Like, it moved in a way that made me seem like just the most uncoordinated person ever. On the other side of that 5-wire, it was just basically an open grazing field for about 1,000 acres. The only prominent feature in that field was an old like a cattle feeder. It's like a sheet metal kind of shed to feed cows out of. Now that clearing, or that 1,000-acre clearing, it terminated in a tributary, which is basically like a pretty large creek that was a branch of the North Canadian River. Now this tributary, it was very deep defilade. So you would have probably about a 15-foot drop. And then at the bottom of the drop, there would be this creek. Now in Oklahoma, especially with plains lands, you know, where it's not like a lot of trees, the way you find water, if you're just looking at like imagery or whatever, you find trees, you find linear groups of trees, and that's how you can find water. So what I'm thinking is that they was using that creek with a defilade as an access of transit. It was probably walking up and down that creek, and it probably jumped out of the creek and went to scout out our homestead and our ranch for food, because I believe they're opportunistic feeders. I know the whole thing as far as them being habitual bipeds. That's not the case. They're definitely not habitual bipeds.
And what's your theory on that? I mean, because I've heard, I've read, I've seen a lot of different things. The way a human walks is not really ergonomical in terms of it's kind of the shittiest way that we can walk or move around, right? So when you look at an ape, as an ape moves, and it's, you know, it is using all 4 limbs. that tends to be more, ergonomic. It tends to be more efficient, right? So what's your theories on Bigfoot doing that same sort of thing?
Now, okay, so my theory is, I really wish we could see. I know it's shooting for the moon, but like to see an actual holotype, like an actual cadaver or like a piece of a cadaver of these things, because it's really hard to make this many inferences, and
For sure.
because of the wonderful work that guys like Dr. Meldrum and Dr. Grover Krantz, like some of those guys, Dr. Mindernagel, because of their research and their work, we do know some things like tangibly about their anatomy and functional morphology, like their feet. We know the shape of their feet, which people joke and laugh like a Bigfoot foot is essentially just a giant facsimile model of a human foot.
Yeah, no, tell us more about that.
When people say, oh, it's a baby Bigfoot track, a lot of people will start laughing and say, what, so basically just a human track or just a small person's track? I have spent a lot of time just staring at casts of like historically significant Sasquatch prints, and this is a living being. 100% these things have their own anatomy. Okay, so as far as their feet, they basically have all the same components as a human foot. As an anatomically modern human, a Sasquatch print will have basically the same nomenclature. Now, the difference is because anatomically modern humans we're evolved for the adaptation of persistence hunting, running down megafauna for days and days and days. And yeah, it is kind of a shitty way of just anatomical configuration, but because we have that fixed longitudinal and that transverse arch in our feet, we can just run and run and run. Right. These creatures, it is very clear that they have no such arch. That's why they have kind of just a flat, underdeveloped anterior part of the foot. Okay.
Yeah. So it hinges, right? It's like a hinge.
Yep, absolutely. So let me show you this one.
Yeah.
So right here, you have basically the four tarsals right there, where you have the talus, the talus attached to the tibia. That's the biggest tarsal in your foot. Right. And then the navicular, and then you have the calcaneus, the heel, and then the cuboid. You have those four tarsals. Cuboid, calcaneus, talus, navicular. Now, in between there, you have what's called the Choppert's joint. We have those. Humans have the Choppert's joint, but it's fixed. It is a anatomically static feature. Right. These creatures, just like all the other hominoids, your pen, billy apes, chimpanzees, your pongidales, they all have flexible feet that have this bendable Chopper's joint. So because it bends right here, kind of proximal, but it's still considered a mid-tarsus or a transtarsal joint. It gives the foot the very unique ability to function as a dual-purpose organ, where you'll have the full anterior part going out to the distal, operating as a modified prehensile organ. So
they can grab with it.
Exactly. So a prehensile organ, grasping, climbing. Now, I would say a modified prehensile organ, in a sense, as far as modified, because all the other hominoids, your great apes and even your monkeys, will have that same exact anatomy. They'll have basically a flexion crease in the center of their foot, and then the foot can bend, and that gives the anterior part. That's kind of the hallmark, is that bendable anterior that can operate as a prehensile. But
it's more like a hand than a foot. It's
What
more like a hand
also-
than a foot. Yeah.
Indeed, but what gives it its another hallmark that gives it its prehensile is having an opposed or an abducted hallux, a big toe. Now, this is why Bigfoot, another reason why Bigfoot is so strange. From the tracks, it obviously has that prehensile anterior, but it has an inline hallux. It has an adducted big toe,
Like us.
like us.
Yeah.
Versus with the great apes where you usually see it
Ye-
offset a bit. Yeah.
Now, what I personally think, I think that the hallucio metatarsal, basically, just just behind that, the hallux, the big toe, I think the hallucio metatarsal is kind of spongy and flexible. I think it's able to abduct or diverge a lot more than we think it can.
Okay. And like on our foot, that would be like the ball of our foot, right? That hard, right? So it would be
Yes.
very, very different. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Because that makes
We have the very distinct ball in our foot, and that also, if you look at the medial side of the foot, the side of your big toe, it has that very distinct convexity,
right.
like where it kind of goes in like a question mark.
Yeah. So something else that I've heard is that, like unlike us, most of our weight is on our heel, right? So with this, it's almost moved like the shin and is moved more center of the foot, which gives it it also changes its gait, changes how it walks, right?
Well, that's the leaning forward, right? That you were talking about when it was moving. It looked like it was a lot of weight forward versus when we walk. I mean, we can do that when we're running, leaning forward, but generally we don't walk leaning
it's
forward.
more center of gravity for it. I don't know. Well, you would know better than we do.
Hey, you guys, you guys definitely know y'all stuff. Y'all didn't even need me here. Hell.
No, that's not true.
I've
just been watching. I'm very interested in this stuff, and I mean, I watch. I don't know if you've heard of him, Thinker Thunker. Have you heard of this?
Oh yeah,
he's amazing, and I've learned actually a lot from him, just in terms of how he breaks down how a human walks.
Yeah, I really like him also.
Yeah. So, but
you nailed it as far as the human gait, because of the shape, because of the size of our bones in our upper legs, like our femurs, and then our lower legs. Because we have that fixed longitudinal arch, we have a very strange, like we usually heel strike and then kind of roll forward.
Right.
And that's also just that distribution of weight. It's also a very quick way that I can tell a Bigfoot track from just a person with a Bigfoot's track is just the placement of weight, because every track, it's not just a footprint. It's, Dr. Meldrum's term is a dynamic interaction with, the micro terrain. When the Bigfoot hits the ground, by contrast, the majority of its weight is going to be placed on the full anterior, on that entire forefoot, because it's going to, depending on how it's locomoting, it might actually dorsiflex and then stick that whole forefoot, bam. So you're going to see that deep impression on the instep area.
Like when you watch the Patty film, right? Or sorry, go ahead, Corey.
Just a quick question. So, you know how humans, for example, some people walk more on their instep, some people walk more on the outside of their foot. Do you notice any of that with, you seem to have a bunch of castings. Is there any of those differences, or is there a consistency with the way they move? Like that there's
that's a
not.
Good question.
I'm just curious because I know we all have, again, I tend to walk on my instep. So if you look on my shoe, you would see it's all worn on the inside more than it is on the outside. Is that a similar case to Bigfoot? Like, do they have this, or is it a consistent, let's say consistency with how they move?
Okay, so to try to answer that as simply as possible, and again, before I really start getting down this rabbit hole, all of this is inferred. We don't know any of this empirically. What I believe is the mode of locomotion is going to alter the type of track you're going to see. I think they have general methods of locomoting, being the standard bipedal walking like we saw in the Patterson Gimlin film, with the whole knees bent and that whole compliant gait rope, the tightrope gait, where all of the tracks are in like a line, like a straight linear pattern instead of having straddle. That's part of that compliant gait. I think that they can walk in that method, and that is going to leave your standard Sasquatch type of tracks. Now, if they're negotiating tougher terrain, you might see a track with a disc, and I'll show you guys some of these tracks when I go back in the house, but you can see a track with a very distinct pressure ridge, a ridge where it shows that flexible mid-tarsus. If the thing picks up speed and it starts running, that's when they leave these the colloquial half tracks that you hear about, where only the anterior part will drop. And when they leave those half tracks, it's very distinct, because obviously, you know, basic Newtonian physics, when you have something that's bigger and it's being transferred over a smaller area, it's going to leave a more prominent print.
Mm-hmm.
You have those comet tails when it negotiates steeper micro terrain, where it loses its placement of its feet. You might have like a slip out. You could have like a hand that hits the ground every now and then, but it's basically the mode of locomotion is kind of going to affect the type of footprint that you're going to get. I don't know if that really answered your question.
No,
that makes sense.
It makes sense, right? Like you were talking about with the anterior, when they're running on the balls of their feet, essentially, right? That's what's hitting the ground, and that's where they're putting all their weight. So, yeah, I was just curious if there was any those characteristics that you see how humans go off and we all walk the same, but we don't.
Yep, they're
we're losing you, Chris. You're getting choppy. You might not need to get closer to your Wi-Fi. You still there?
You guys hear me?
Oh yeah, You're good now.
Perfect.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that, guys.
That's okay. That's all right. So go ahead.
You were broken there when you were asking me that last question. Can you go again, please?
I was just commenting on the. Yes, you did answer my question as much as you're able because of the inference you're making from the prints. That there's not necessarily, there are different prints based on the method of locomotion they're using, not necessarily, okay, hey, some Bigfoots walk on their instep, some walk on their outstep, if the outstep is a thing.
There are prints though too where they can tell that the creature was injured as well. You know, like you're basically in the wilderness. I mean, there's shit's gonna happen. You're gonna break a foot. You're gonna, they're not impervious to injury. So
indeed, I wish I was impervious to injury, but
us too.
There are, and I really recommend that you guys read Dr. Meldrum's book, Legend Meets Science, because it goes into all of this stuff. And
okay,
like you were talking about, they all have a flat instep. Generally speaking, the North America, Canada and the United States, the North American Sasquatch has a flat, flexible instep and a very robust calcaneus. It has a much greater breadth. The width is much greater than the width of an anatomically modern human foot. The toes are generally not tapered. They have these very unique phenotypical traits. Now, if we go over to Russia, and here's what's really crazy. If we were to go over to Russia or to Vietnam, and actually Dr. Meldrum just got done writing another academic paper on, have you guys ever read the Relic Hominin Inquiry?
No.
Basically it's basically an academic scholarly journal, and it's all about Bigfoot. It's a bunch of PhDs that have come together and they write these research papers, and super interesting stuff.
Now, with that said, how is this discussion in the science community? I know that, there's a lot of people that are, they're anti Bigfoot. They think it's a waste of time. I mean, how do you feel
Anti-Bigfoot.
about? Well, they are.
I
They
will,
think that it's not anything, but they don't want to even look at the evidence. They don't want to even look at.
Pseudoscience is what they call it.
Yeah, they just go, it's it's for kids, But
so I was gonna answer this. I was gonna finish what I was kind of getting at, and then I'll.
oh,
I'll
okay,
talk
no,
about
go
it.
ahead.
So-
Sorry, yeah.
We talked about the relic hominid inquiry and Dr. Modern's new paper. His newest paper basically suggests that there is morphological differences geographically. For instance, the Russian almasty, like the Russian snowman,
Mhm.
has a form of an arch. Same thing with the great wild man of Vietnam, the rock ape.
Okay.
Both of those creatures have arches, which is, this stuff is wild. It really
It
is.
Yeah.
And I could see why a lot of people would be dubious at best. And I see why a lot of scientists, mainstream institutionalized scientists would be, very antithetical to some of this stuff.
For sure. Yeah.
Now, to answer your question about mainstream science and Sasquatch and everything, what the problem, really wherein lies the problem, is there has been so many hoaxers,
Mhm.
Since the Patterson Gimlin film. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then who I really am not a big fan of is the mainstream media. You have
Mhm.
these arrogant, reporters with, a bachelor's degree and everything, and they just think they know everything in the world, and anything that's Bigfoot related. Look at how the reporters on the news deal with it. It's always jocular. It's always
Mhm.
like keen and laughing. And
For sure.
maybe I'm just a bitter old guy, but I can't stand the way the news handles it.
They're
You're
not
not
handling it
alone.
impartially. They're clearly passing judgment on the material they're covering, which they shouldn't be.
That's right. That's
It
right.
should be provide the information, not pass judgment.
And I think
Don't-
that's why people don't come forward. You have a lot of people that have seen
like
things.
aliens, right? Same
Hey.
idea.
Yeah. exactly.
100%. That's why
Yeah.
I saw the creature that I saw 22 years ago, and I'm
Mhm.
just now starting to talk about it publicly.
Fair enough. Absolutely.
For science, it's pretty simple. We're going to need a holotype. We're going to need a type specimen. And however it comes to be, it has to be, it has to be collected and deposited and then described. And then once it's
Mhm.
described, it'll be, Bigfoot will no longer be in the realm of the occult and the ethereal and the tabloids and the
Right.
Loch Ness fucking monster. That's
Right.
It'll no longer be a cryptid. It'll now be an actual thing. As far as now, I do have one quick question, Chris. So we've got about 4 minutes left according to the timer, and hopefully they'll extend us. Here's hoping.
Yeah.
Had you not had your encounter, do you think you would have been as interested in Bigfoot as you are? Or is that encounter fundamentally changed you to like, this has become something you're super passionate now about?
100% from the encounter.
Right.
I wouldn't even have thought about Bigfoot really if it wasn't for that.
Mm-hmm. No kidding.
But
And-
sorry, go ahead.
No. Yeah. I can understand that. I mean, most people that, we have had another, other folks we've talked to, or I have, sorry, I shouldn't involve you, Corey, that
You
have
hang
had,
out with different
had
people, Phil.
yeah, that's right. That have had encounters, and they say, it changed them. It changed how they viewed sort of what they understood, right, and what they thought was normal.
Yeah.
And
And
I can't understand because I've never seen that. So,
out of all the encounters, and I don't know if you guys listen to like Sasquatch Chronicles or any of the other podcasts.
Yep, I have. Yeah.
But I started listening to Sasquatch Chronicles a few months ago, and my encounter is like so like pathetic compared to some of those encounters on that show. I could not imagine like having some of these encounters that these people have had.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. Like, I have a friend. I don't know if you guys have heard of the siege of Hanobia.
No.
If you guys have not, if you take one thing away from this interview, I would definitely go Google the siege of Hanobia. Honobia. It is.
I just wrote it down.
Probably the most interesting Bigfoot story I've ever heard in my whole life.
Okay.
Now,
You care to share a little bit of that, or yeah?
do we have time?
We'll make time. This is
Okay.
This
Yeah,
is
worst
this
comes
is
to worst,
about
we
you.
get interrupted and we start back up again.
That's right.
Rock and roll, and we can talk anyway. Like, call me whatever. Anyway, okay. So I'm probably gonna mess up a few like meta details, but basically this is what happened. You have these two brothers, educated, good guys, like kind of all around, all American Oklahoma guys. And this is in the mountains of Oklahoma. Yeah, we actually do have mountains. So this is actually up in the mountains. The two brothers buy acreages next to each other. They have these plans of, we're gonna give this to our kids, and we're gonna hunt on this land and everything else. So they got their properties, and the deer were abundant. It was really good hunting, and they were, killing a bunch of deer. And apparently they had an outdoor shed for collecting the deer carcasses. Well, the main guy, Mike, he apparently had seen one of these creatures on multiple occasions. I guess he had seen the thing during the daytime, clear as day, with his own two eyes. But he didn't say anything to his brother or his family or anything, because obviously it's a crazy thing. Well, I guess as time went on, things started escalating, meaning the creature started manipulating the locks on the shed, removing the deer carcasses. So they would have, 5 or 6 deer. When they would go to bed, wake up, the door would be broken off, and there'd be no deer. Well, it escalated from that to window peeking. Basically, my buddy would be sitting in his living room watching TV, and there would be a giant anthropoid staring in the window.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
And basically, this type of behavior can temperate ecosystem. They're a disaggregate ecosystem, and they're their own biome that stands alone from all the other from the usual biome. There are underground caverns that have, holes, like let's say like a small surface hole at the top of these large underground chambers. And they're finding out that some of these underground caverns have their own ecosystem as well, like full-on ecosystems. There's no way we can tell if these things are real. Yeah, using some of the same logic that we apply to like conventional primatology. Like, yes, I get it. A lowland gorilla can eat 10,000 calories a day if it's active. You can literally spot the gorilla's pattern of life from an airplane, 10,000 feet up, because they eat so much flora. There's no Bigfoot. It can't be possible because it would starve. The North American winters would, end up snuffing it out. And even in the summer months, there's not enough plant-based foods to sustain the thing, between lichens and roots and everything else. And it would be major excavation that we would see from where these creatures were physically.
And again, but this is all based on we're trying to apply, well, this is what we know, let's apply it to this. And maybe the same rules don't apply.
Exactly.
Right? That's the problem, is we're using what we know to apply to something that it might not. And this is like the whole idea of dark matter, right? The universe weighs way more than we can account for. So there must be something we can't account for. Right? Now, mind you, I think Einstein's theories have been pretty good at they've been proving fairly true about things, but yeah,
so far
science evolves.
That's right.
It's man, there's just so many things. Like, we don't know anything about these creatures other than the shape of their foot, like the functional morphology of the foot. We don't know anything. Like, these things have characteristics that are unlike any other ape. Homo sapiens, chimpanzees, like for instance, the tepia, the basically the film in the eye that reflects light into the retina.
Mhm.
When people said that the Bigfoot had eye shine or the eyes glowed, if you shine basically a light in like a dog's eyes or something, it'll
Mhm.
reflect.
Yep.
Okay. Here's one thing that's absolutely strange.
Mm.
Having that characteristic is a pretty common, it's a pretty colloquial trait when dealing with Bigfoot. Eye shine is it's a pretty frequent thing. Not one hominoid, not one great ape, not one lesser ape. None of the apes, Homo sapiens included, have that characteristics, have that physical characteristic. So there are some physically strange things about these creatures.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm very curious as to what they are. I'm sure, obviously, everybody is. And if you ever listen to Sasquatch Chronicles, that's what Wes always asks: is, what do you think these creatures are? Well,
Yeah.
there's no way to really tell because it's not. It has things that are unlike anything else.
Mhm.
You know, I do think that we can make some assertions, like we know it's a primate. We know it's an advanced primate. It's like a haplorhine. We know it's an anthropoid. That means it has stereoscopic binocular vision. That means its primary sensory is probably going to be its eyes. It's not going to be like a big smeller. And the reason for that is negotiating trees, like when primates used to brachiate, like swing from tree to tree.
Mhm.
Having that ability to calculate and having eyes, having vision that is binocular, that overlaps, having that sense is so important for primates because of that alone.
It gives them proper depth perception.
Exactly. So we can make these kind of inference as far as what its primary sense is. They respond to novel stimulation in their environment. Like if you were to take a bunch of balloons and like partially inflate them with helium, put them up in the canopy of the trees, you would probably get a response. Like I'm hypothesizing. We know that primates, there are two weaknesses that they have. Just like us, sweet things and buttery things, like fat things.
Those are my favorite.
Mine too. So it's just having a methodology and trying to collect information on these things, whether it comes by way of your regular trace evidence, like physical evidence, electronic evidence, even though I'm not really a big fan of electronic evidence, just because everybody's so incredulous with it as a whole.
Mhm.
But then what I'm really trying to collect is latent and physical trace evidence. That's what I'm trying to do as a Bigfoot researcher, as a new Bigfoot researcher.
So tell me, Chris, can you kind of take us through some of the things that you do, like to, do your research?
All right, so I'll be straight up with you. I do a lot of reading. I do a lot of listening to YouTube videos,
Mhm.
and a lot of learning, because there's a lot I don't know, man.
Sure.
I've been, let's see, I've been like hardcore dedicating to Bigfoot like full time for about 7 months now. So it's
Okay.
still a lot of learning and a lot of developing my own methodology as a researcher. Because I did come up with the idea that, okay, I'm going to focus on this, and this. And that's kind of where I'm at now.
Right.
Now, when my research does start after the weather breaks, there are going to be a few different fields of expertise that I'm going to try to focus in and hopefully become proficient at certain things.
Right. So you'll be going out into the wilds and,
Squatching.
squatching.
I will be. I love that word too. I will be. I will be squatching. But
Very good.
20 years in the military, I don't do heat. Doing Iraq and Afghanistan, I'm just gonna wait for the weather to break.
Is it really warm there? Yeah.
I also have a sneaky suspicion that these things probably aren't out when it's balls hot.
Yeah, bedding down.
When the weather breaks, I'm gonna go out and try to see what kind of physical evidence I can collect. It's have you guys ever heard of Lockhart's exchange principles?
No.
So in science, it was from like 19th century science. There was Dr. Lockhart, and basically his whole spiel was anytime an object makes contact with another object, or anytime basically a man goes somewhere or does something, no matter how sneaky the person tries to be or whatnot, there is always going to be trace left behind. No matter how latent it is, there's always going to be some type of evidence left behind from the action occurring. And
that makes sense. Yep.
Lockhart ended up being like a like using his methodology to help like forensic and like criminal.
I was going to say, this sounds completely like a forensics approach, that there's, if somebody was here, they left something. Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm going to go off of, is Lockhart's exchange principles, using rationalism, using common sense, knowing that these things don't do telepathy, and they don't freaking, move stuff with their mind, or there's some like ludicrous, just
they're not spirits, they're actual physical things,
just mad things. I 100% believe they're corporeal beings, and I don't believe that they have any of these magical abilities. And it's pretty simple why, because nothing else in nature has these magical abilities.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you, Chris. I think you're on the right track with being a man of science and using those techniques to explain this. It's a lot better than the Bigfoot and aliens. They hang out. That's usually wait a minute.
That's my whole goal, is to get this out of that whole aliens and just madness realm.
For sure. Well, I wish you a lot of luck in your journey, and I hope you keep us posted. We would love to probably get you on in the future and see where you're at when you've put some of your research together.
So I'm literally always around. You guys can get a hold of me anytime.
Awesome, man.
It's been pretty enlightening, Chris. Again, I'm not as much into this as Phil is, so this was a bit more of a deep dive than I'm used to, for sure. Cool. Much appreciated.
Would you guys, before we get off the phone, would you guys like to hear about a couple of the specific methodologies that I plan to employ?
Sure.
All right. So, I've really been trying to rack my brain around this since I've been into it, because there's obviously a lot of ineffective methodologies. Basically, everything except for two guys on horseback in the 60s has been not worked very well. So I'm like, man, I need to really kind of think outside the box and do something that these guys aren't doing, because the whole beating on trees thing is just, I'm not trying to waste my time,
For sure.
I'm really trying to, I want to see what I saw 22 years ago. It's more than anything, it's like a Captain Ahab kind of quest. Like
Sasquatch is your white whale.
It is. I am literally Santiago on the Old Man in the Sea.
Yes.
So I realized that we need to do certain things different. For instance, if these fucking creatures are breaking trees with their bare hands, you guys have heard of the tree twists,
right? Yeah.
I have been really doing a lot of work, a lot of practice, and a lot of studying with various forensic reagent sprays, like Blue Star or Luminol. Basically, these chemical compounds that when they come in contact with hemoglobin in the
Mhm.
blood, they light up like a shiny nickel when you hit them
For
with
sure.
a black light.
Okay.
So part of my methodology is I'm going to have a forensic kit with the best possible forensic reagent sprays for hemoglobin, for like fatty discharges. Like I will also have a type of reagent spray that I can hit with a blue laser that will indicate if anything, like the skin, like the oil on these things is skin, that will initiate.
Oh, you're breaking up here, Chris. Oh, there you go. You're back. Oh,
these sprays are part of my methodology. Are you there?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you were gone for a second, and yeah, you're back.
Another thing, and this is kind of crazy, and I understand this is kind of shooting for the moon, and I do not by any stretch of the imagination have an engineering degree, nor am I really handy, but I bought these very big military grade weather balloons. And I also have a thermal optic, my handheld thermal, which is actually, it's Wi-Fi capable. So I can control that thermal imager with the graphic user interface from an app on my phone.
Very good.
What I am doing is I've got one of these weather balloons out, and I'm trying to build a stabilized pedestal assembly where the thermal will sit underneath the balloon on like a little basket with a crash cage that I'm making out of plastic bottles, actually, where it will have one sensor as a thermal, and then it will have another sensor, which is this Samsung kind of sensor pod, like turret type of camera that uses Bluetooth, that you can basically control the camera with Bluetooth.
Mhm.
My plan is to get this stable together in such.
Oh, we've lost you again. Are you there, Chris?
Yeah.
Oh, we lost. Yeah, you're breaking up.
Oh shit. Well,
That's okay.
basically, it's putting sensors and cameras
In the weather balloons.
on a weather balloon for that, that bird's eye view, the whole, intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance type of aspect to it.
That's a good idea.
Propulsing the weather balloon is what I'm kind of working on now. Basically, I'm going to try to create some kind of track system that essentially follows hydrography. So when you have creeks, what I'm trying to have my balloon sensor thing do is go along the creeks. Exactly.
Yeah, that's smart. Because everything needs water. That's
having the two spectrums, I'll have a thermal display on one, and then I'll have an actual visual acuity with the other sensor, and then there'll be a microphone attached to it also. So I've got this about halfway. I got this thing about halfway put together.
Well, let us know when you do have it together.
We would love to see what it looks like. That would be cool.
Yeah, man.
Okay, yeah, it just looks like a gigantic fucking. It looks kind of crazy actually, but yeah, I'll do that.
Perfect.
The best science does.
That's right.
So yeah, I have this. I have the particle engagements. I actually went to a primatology field school in South America where we did movement and feeding ecology for these fucking ugly ass things that live down there. They're nothing cool like Bigfoot, but basically, I learned a lot of traps, like how to put together hair traps and tissue traps when I was down there at primatology school. So what I'm planning on doing also is making modified versions of these hair traps and these tissue traps, which are basically vases, like it's a glass vase that is angled in such a way that the creature will have to bend in such a way that the dorsal part, like the bottom part of the arm, will make contact with basically rows and rows and rows of double-sided tape that's going to pull out, in theory, hair from the bulb.
Oh,
So when you get bulb, when you get like the hair from the root, hypothetically, you will get nuclear DNA, and then possibly you will get mitochondrial DNA. You know, the DNA that has its own DNA from the medulla, if it has a medulla. But that's his whole thing. All I know is that I have these methods that I'm working on where it's basically the creature will see the problem. It will see the potential to solve a problem with the vase, and it will see, okay, if I stick my hand in here and turn it this way, I'm going to eat these peanut butter balls, and then I'm going to hopefully, fingers crossed, get a whole bunch of hair that way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what's messed up is, that would be a good hair trap with a double-sided tape. But if somebody were to just smash the other end of that thing so it was just shards of broken glass, then you would have a tissue trap also.
Well, that's true. You cut yourself in the glass, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, and then eventually, and these are all things that are going to take me a very long time, but I'm building a projector on my rifle. I have it looks like a sound suppressor, like a silencer, but it's not. Basically, it's a hollow tube that is going to shoot an arrow, like a crossbow type of bolt. And what is going to be on the end of the bolt is basically a flying biopsy.
Oh,
what I want to do is to shoot a projectable biopsy arrow, and have the capability to fire that projectable biopsy arrow at these creatures. The way I see it, if I had the ability to video record one of these creatures and record myself shooting the thing with the biopsy arrow, and then using, proper physical / latent evidence handling methods to collect the thing, have a good chain of custody to the lab that it goes to. Like I said, that might not put it into the catalog of life, but I really think that would make a lot more people believe in this creature.
Yeah, I hope you don't piss it off when you shoot it with that.
The way
comes after you.
Bigfoot.
The way I see it, man, to be frankly honest with you, I survived some pretty bad car accidents. I survived Iraq and Afghanistan. If I'm going to die from Bigfoot trying to biopsy this thing, I've accepted my fate.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. I mean, we've learned a lot from you, and I hope that we can get you on in the future. And I think that using science to find this thing is absolutely the right way to do things. So once again, thanks so much for your time, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you guys having me on. I love,
Perfect.
Anytime I have somebody to talk to about Bigfoot, it's literally like a captive audience, because I don't talk to anybody about this, and it's just like,
and that's good.
What about this?
Yeah, and I mean, I do want to kind of keep it so we can put it on the IGTV. It is limited to an hour, so with the edits, we'd like to keep it at least around an hour. And
we're gonna have to chop this one up a bit just because of the way the recording kind of
out but that's okay. So, we do the editing.
We'll see.
Oh, look at you and your footprint.
No, that's got to be in the video, Phil.
That will be in the video. There you go.
This is the half track.
That's the running one, right?
That's climbing or running.
Yeah, this is the one you were asking about. So when they are running, this is what we believe that the tracks look like.
Makes a lot of sense.
No arc, no longitudinal arch. They will flex their foot and leave a half track.
They're just, and it is so much of this stuff, man. It's so awesome. And keep up all the good work.
I'm trying, brother.
All right, man. Well, I'm Phil.
Thanks for your time, Chris.
Yeah, I'm Phil. This is my co-host Corey. We had Dr. Allen here to, explain things, and it's been awesome. Thank you so much, sir, and we will see you on the Instagrams.
Take care, Jim.
Have a good night.
Take care, Chris.
Bye.